Alright, hello everyone. We are going to dive into JavaScript. So I want you to open up this file. You should have gotten it in class. Open it up in the browser. It's called JavaScript variables and data types.html, and it looks like this. And then the other thing that I want you to do is open it up in Sublime Text too. So I've got it up in the browser and I've got it open in Sublime Text over here. Okay, before we dive in, I want to show you, now I don't know if we've covered this in class or not yet, but I just want to show you how we can, a couple of different, or at least one way to put JavaScript into a web page. There's a few different ways to do it. An easy way to do it is to use a script tag. So, and the script tag oftentimes goes inside the head tag. So, and I've actually already got a script tag in here, and that's doing something else. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add another script tag to on line 11 here. So I'll add the opening tag, and then the closing tag will go on line 13. And go ahead and do this with me and follow along. Okay, so I've added a script tag. Now you're going to see your first JavaScript command. I'm just going to hit tab once to kind of keep everything indented and lined up. And here's what I want you to type. Now pay attention to the syntax. That's the big struggle when you're a beginner, is syntax. Okay, so what this is a JavaScript command. It's called alert, and we'll see what it does in a second here. But anyways, what you do is you type the word alert, and then inside of parentheses you type in hello world. But notice that hello world has double quotes around it. Okay, so eyeball this really well. Make sure you type it in exactly the way I have it here. And then we'll put a semicolon at the end. Every statement, we'll talk about statements, should end with a semicolon in JavaScript. Okay, so make sure you get that just perfect, exactly how I have it here. And then go ahead and press Control S to save. And then I'm going to bounce back over to the browser here, and I'm going to refresh the page. So I can either press this button up here to refresh, or I can hit the F5 button. So I'll go ahead and hit the F5 button, and there you go. There's the result of that code. We see an alert box. That's why it's called, the command is called alert. And then whatever we put inside the parentheses appears inside the alert box. And then when I click OK here, then it'll go on and show the rest of the page. All right. And one other thing I want to show you is how we can comment code in JavaScript. So I'm going to bounce back over to Sublime Text. And now comments aren't code, they're just little notes for programmers. So when the browser comes across a comment, it'll basically just ignore it. So notes are just for programmers to leave reminders to themselves. So one way to do a comment is to start it with 2 forward slashes like that. We call them whack whacks. And then I'll just put in a meaningless comment here. This is an alert. So now if I were to save this and run it in the browser again, we'd see the exact same thing that we saw the last time we ran it in the browser. So the point is that the browser will ignore comments, but it's good for us to put comments in our code to help us walk us through some tricky code maybe, or just to leave notes and reminders for ourselves and other programmers. One more thing. So this is a one-line comment. So if I had a big long comment and I wanted to, if I had a lot of stuff to say, what I would do is I would do a comment like this. I would start the comment with a forward slash and an asterisk, and I would end the comment, I hit return a few times here, with a asterisk and a forward slash. Okay, so and what that'll allow me to do is write multi-line comments. So I'm just going to type in garbage here, but notice that now my comment can span multiple lines. So that's the difference between this type of comment and the first type that I show you. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and remove this entire script tag. So for me, it's line 18 all the way down to line 11. I'm just going to get rid of that entire script tag that we just added, and hopefully we'll be I'm going to set it up like that. Hopefully we'll all be on the same line numbers as we go through this code. So you'll be pretty close. But anyways, go ahead and remove that entire script tag, and we will get started. So we're going to start out by talking about variables and data types in JavaScript. Every language, or pretty much every language, has variables and data types. The concepts are generally the same for all of them. So if you learn them in JavaScript, it'll make it easier to learn variables and data types in other languages. But different languages kind of have different rules for variables and data types. So what is a variable? Right here in this box right here, this first black code box, you can see that I've got a comment, and then I've got this line of code right here. This is a statement. You can see statements always end with a semicolon here. So anyways, what this statement does is it declares and initializes a variable. So there's quite a few technical terms that I just threw at you right there. So I'll break this down part by part. When you want to create a variable in JavaScript, you have to type in var. That's a special word in JavaScript. So it starts with var, and then we can come up with a name for our variable, and we get to pick the names. There are some rules for the names that you can use, but we'll worry about those later. And then I've got the equal sign and followed by 10. So what this is I'm declaring a variable called age. That's the variable name, and I'm setting it to a value of 10. So basically, this age variable is a placeholder, and it's storing a value of 10 right now. So variables, they store values for us. And in just a second, I'll explain why variables are so important. But what I want to do first is I want to talk about data types. So right here, our age variable is storing a value of 10. And if I were to ask you what data type that was, that might sound like a weird question, and you might not know what I'm talking about. But what it is a number. 10 is a number. We can store different types of data in our variables, not just numbers. So let's scroll down to this data type section here, and you can see, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole chunk of code right here in this second code box. So I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to bounce over to Sublime Text. And if you scroll down the page on Sublime Text, I think it's on line 220. Here it is, 223. I've put in a script tag for us. So scroll on down to line 223, and I've already got a script tag for us there. And go ahead and just paste this code in. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure everything's indented properly. So what we've got here is we're declaring and initializing a bunch of variables. The first one is the variable name is some number, and it's got a value of 7. That's like what we saw before. The second one, the variable name I've made up, is called some boolean. So and I called it that because it's storing a boolean data type. A boolean data type is either true or false. So we use these data types all the time in JavaScript, because if a condition is true, then we might want to run one set of code, and if it's false, we might want to run some other code. So we use boolean data types a lot in JavaScript, and as I said, they can either be true or false, but nothing else. And then this third variable is what we call a string. So I've given it a name of some string, and I've set it to a value of this right here, hello exclamation point. Now a couple things here. First of all, what is a string? Well, I think the string data type is called string because it holds a string of characters. You can see that, so it's holding the word hello with an exclamation point. That's a string of characters. Now the other thing that I want to point out is that when you initialize a variable to a string data type, you have to use quotes around the value. So you can see here that I've got double quotes on both sides here. Now you can use single quotes or double quotes, but you have to make sure that it's the same on both sides. So I wouldn't be able to put a double quote on this side and a single quote on this side. But what I could do is I could put a single quote around both sides, like this if I wanted to. Either way, I'll just undo that. Okay, so we've got numbers, booleans and strings, and there are other data types, but we're not going to worry about them right now, so we can just ignore these right here. So all right, let's bounce back over to the page and see what we have next here. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to the next code box here, and I want to show you, talk about why we have to put quotes around our string variables. So I'm going to go ahead and copy everything in this box here, hit Control C, and I'm going to go back over to Sublime Text, and we don't need the code that's already in the script tag here, so I'm just going to delete that. And then I'll go ahead and paste this in here, and I'm going to go ahead and line everything up right, so it should look like this. So what I've got here, there's a problem with this code right here. I've got var day equals Wednesday, but notice that I don't have quotes around Wednesday here. So here's the problem. If I don't put quotes around it, JavaScript will think that I'm referring to a variable called Wednesday. So, and then if there is no variable called Wednesday, then we'll get an error in our code. So this actually brings up something really important. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent right here, but this line has an error in it because I didn't put the quotes around the value. So JavaScript thinks that Wednesday right here is another variable that we've declared somewhere else, but we haven't, and that's the problem. So I want to show you, this brings up an important topic about what to do when you get an error in your code. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to bounce back over to the browser, and I'm going to refresh the page here. Now, if you ever come across a situation where your code's not working the way you expect it to, and you can't figure out why, what you want to do is press the F12 button, and that will open up this, which is called the developer tools. And hopefully everybody's using Firefox right now. You can use the developer, all the big browsers have developer tools, and you can open them up by hitting F12. But they're a little bit different, so hopefully we're all using Firefox right now. If not, you can go ahead and reload the page in Firefox. But make sure this console tab is selected, and here's the console, and you can see here's an error message right here. So it's saying reference error, Wednesday is not defined. So it thinks that Wednesday is a variable and it can't find it because we didn't use the quotes around it. Now, a lot of times these error messages are pretty cryptic and they don't make much sense. But what is important is if you go way over here to the right hand side, it'll give you a line number where the error is. So it's kind of hard to tell here, but this 226 here, that's the line number of the error. And I think this 9 after the colon, I think that's how many spaces inside that line before it came across the error. But usually what we only care about is just the line number itself. So if your code doesn't work and you're not sure why, hit F12 and that'll open up the developer tools. Make sure you're on the console tab and then look for an error message. A lot of times the message won't be very helpful, but you'll get an idea of where the error is by finding the line number right here. Now, most of the times the line number is correct. So, but there are rare occasions where the line number is off by a little bit because JavaScript gets confused. But most of the time it's going to be right on for the line number. So, in that case, what I would do, I'd go back over to my code and I'd go to line 226, and sure enough, here's where our error is. Now to fix the error, all I need to do is put quotes around it, and that's what I did on the second part of this code sample right there. So very important when you're using string data types for your variables, make sure that you put quotes around them. Otherwise, JavaScript will think that you're referring to a variable, which probably doesn't exist. Okay, let's go back to the web page and see what's next here. Where is it? I'm going to find it. Oops. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the developer tools here. And we just went through this little code sample here. So, all right, I didn't tell you the importance of variables and why we use them. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to look at this sample. Let's say we've got a program where we're alerting out Bob in a bunch of different places. So pretend that I put a comment here, but just pretend there's a whole bunch of code in here between this alert and this alert and this alert. So we've got a big program with lots of code in it, and there's 3 spots in the program where we're alerting out Bob. Well, programs always change. So I might need to not alert Bob anymore, but maybe I need to alert something else like Sally or Betty or something like that. Well, now what I've got to do is I've got to go find all the spots where I'm alerting Bob and change them to Sally or Betty. Okay, that's not ideal, and a lot of times we'll miss one and it'll cause problems. We'll have bugs in our code. But if I'm using a variable, I'm going to scroll on down to the next code box here. So now what I've done is I've created a variable called username, and I've set it to a value of Bob, and that is a string of characters. And now if I ever needed to change Bob to Betty or Sally, I only have to do it in one place. So look at what these alerts are doing. They're not alerting out the value Bob, they're alerting out the variable username. And username is a placeholder. And at the moment it's a placeholder for Bob, but all we'd have to do if we wanted to change all those alerts, we could just change them in one place right here. So that's one very important aspect of variables. Okay, moving on down to the next code box here. The comment says you can declare a variable without initializing it to a value. So right here, what I've got is declaring a variable. Let's go ahead and put this in into our code. So let's go ahead and copy this whole thing here in the black code box here. So we'll copy that. We'll go over to Sublime Text, and I'm going to delete everything that's inside that script tag. So we'll clear that out first. And now my indentation's off just a little bit, so I'm just going to make sure that my lines are all lined up so it's nice and neat. We'll talk more about formatting in the future, but it's very important to keep everything lined up nice and neat. So what I've got here is a variable called first name, so I've declared a variable. I've declared a variable called first name, but I haven't initialized it yet. There is no value set to it right now, and you can do that. And sometimes we do that because we don't necessarily know what a variable is going to store. Maybe we'll let the user type in something, and whatever they type in will get assigned to this variable right here. And that's exactly what's going on in the next code sample here. But the point is that I've declared a variable here, but I have not initialized it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and these two little code boxes go together here. So I'm going to take this one here where it's this one is actually assigning a value to that first name variable. So I'll copy that, and I'll go back over to Sublime Text. I'm going to hit return here, and now again I want to line everything up just right. So here's what I have. So this is what we had before: var first name, declared a variable but didn't initialize it, and then here on this line we're actually initializing it. And this is another command. You'll see what this does in just a second here. It's called the prompt command, what it'll do is it'll pop up a box and it'll ask me to type something in, and then as soon as I type it in, whatever I type in will be assigned to our first name variable. And then this next alert will pop, just basically show us what the first name is set to. So if I go ahead and save this code, I'm going to save the page, and I'm going to go back over to the browser and hit refresh. So here's our prompt command. So I'm going to type in Bob here, or Betty, whatever, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to hit OK. And then what we see is the alert. So that's those 3 lines of code right there. So the point is that sometimes we don't know what a variable is going to be assigned to. So we can declare it without initializing it, and then we can assign a value later here. We'll talk more about this code in a second, but okay, I think we're done with this, so we can go ahead and delete this from our script tag, and then we'll move on here. Okay, so I'm back looking at the page here, and I'm going to scroll on down to the next code sample, and we can, once we've assigned a value to a variable, we can change its value, and that's called reassigning a value to a variable. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire code snippet here. Now I'm just copying these and pasting them just to try to save a little bit of time, but if you really want to learn the syntax, you could type these in character by character. Now that can be painful because if you make a mistake when you're a beginner, it's hard to find your errors, so you'll be using the developer tools and the console to try and find your errors. But in the long run, it's actually faster for learning the syntax if you type this stuff in manually rather than cut and paste the whole chunk of code. But I'm just trying to save a little bit of time here, so I'm going to copy that chunk of code and then go back over to Sublime Text here, and I will paste it in here. And then I want to do a little bit of formatting here so all my lines line up just nice. But the point is here is I'm declaring a variable called day, and I'm setting it to a value of Wednesday, and that's a string data type. And then I'm alerting it here. So what we'd see is an alert that says Wednesday. And now I'm taking that day variable and I'm reassigning a new value to it. So you can change the value of a variable. And I think that's why they call them variables, is because they can vary. So I just wanted to point out that you can reassign new values to a variable if you need to. If you want, you can go ahead and save this and run it in the browser, but I think you'll see 2 alerts. You'll see one that says Wednesday, and then right after that you'll see one that says Thursday, and it'll just you can try that on your own here. And once you do that, go ahead and let's just remove this code sample from our script here, from our little playground script tag. That, okay, and then I'll go back over to the browser and see what's next. Okay, so we're going to talk about expressions right now. What is an expression? An expression is basically an equation that can be solved. So right here we've got 5 plus 3. That's an expression, and 5 plus 3 can be solved to a value of 8. So what we say is the expression evaluates to 8. So expressions can be evaluated to a value. Anyways, the whole point of this here is to show you that you can use expressions when you assign values to variables. So right here, let's go ahead and I'm going to take this whole chunk of code right here, copy it, and let's look at it. Let's paste it into Sublime Text here. I'm going to indent everything just to keep everything nice and neat. So I've got a variable that I've called total, and I'm assigning it an expression. So this expression evaluates to 300. So this total is going to be storing 300 at this point. The point is you can use expressions when you assign values to variables. Here's another example. So I've got a variable called Celsius, and it's being assigned a value of 40. And then on the next line, I've got a variable called Fahrenheit, and look at that, I'm using the Celsius variable inside the expression. So basically Celsius is just a placeholder for 40, and so I can substitute 40 for this and then go on and do the rest of the equation, and the result is going to be what gets stored in this variable here called Fahrenheit. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and delete that. We're done with that. So our playground is empty, our script tag is empty, except for that one comment. Let's see what we have next here. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this next code chunk here. We'll copy that, paste it into our script tag over here and have a look at it. And again, I'm just going to indent everything because I'm really particular about that, and you should be too, and we'll talk about formatting more in the future here. So what's going on these lines of code? I've got a variable called str1, and it's holding a string, hello, and then another variable, a variable named str2, and it's holding a value of world. And then I've got str3 here, and that's holding an expression, but now we're dealing with string data types, whereas in our previous example we were dealing with numbers. Now you can do this, but of course you can't do math on strings, but what will happen when you use that plus sign is that it'll combine these strings together. So let's just go ahead and alert str3 here. Go ahead and do this with me. So I'm going to do an alert, and then in parentheses I'm going to put str3. Now notice I didn't use quotes around str3 here because I don't want to alert str3. I actually want to alert the value that it's storing. So in this case I don't put quotes around it because it's not a value, it's actually a variable. So no quotes around str3 here, and what it'll show me is the value that str3 is holding here. So I'll go ahead and save that, bounce back over to the browser and hit refresh, and you can see that str3 is holding hello world. So you can use the plus sign to combine strings together, and when you do that it's called string concatenation, and we'll be doing a lot of that in this course here too. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove this code sample and clear out our script tag, and then bounce back over to the browser and see what we have next here. Okay, so in this next example here, I want to show you what can happen if you try and combine different data types. So let's go ahead and copy this chunk of code here. Copy that, paste it into the browser here, and I'm just going to format it a little bit. So let's see what's going on. Alright, so I've got a variable called sum number, and it's being assigned a value of 3, and that's a number data type. And then another variable called some other number, and that's got a value of 2, but look at, there's quotes around it, so it's a different data type, it's a string. And then what I've got is a variable named result, and I'm setting that equal to this expression here, and in that expression I'm using the plus sign. So what I want to show you here is what happens when you combine different data types. And so you might think that this alert right here will show us 5, but let's see what it actually shows us here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, go over to the browser and hit refresh, and you can see, look at that, it's showing us 32. So what it's doing is it's actually doing string concatenation instead of math. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK here. Now let's take a look at this. Whenever you combine data types, if there's a string in the expression, and remember this variable is actually holding a string, it's going to treat everything in the expression as a string. So that's why we saw 32 instead of 5. So that's just kind of a quirk, and I think a lot of languages are like that. But so you got to be careful that you're using the proper data types, because you may be doing string concatenation when you think you're doing math. So all right, let's get rid of that code sample and see what's next. This is running a little bit longer than I thought. I'll try and speed up a little bit. Okay, so I'm back on the browser, looking at the browser now, and let's move on to the next example. So these are kind of just some odds and ends here to finish everything up here. Sometimes you don't know what the data type of a variable. Maybe somebody else wrote the code and it's in another file, or another line somewhere buried in your program. And you can check the data type of a variable if you want to. So this code sample here is almost exactly the same as the one we just did above. So I'm going to copy that. There's only one slight difference, and I'll go ahead and paste it in here, and indent my code. So the only difference between this code sample and the previous one is this right here. So if you don't know what the data type of a variable is, you can use, this is an operator it's called, but you can just use type of. It's kind of strange. All one word, all lowercase, and then after that, after a space, you can put the variable that you want to check. So if I do an alert and then type of result, it will tell me the data type of result. Now this is a little bit weird because we're using a number data type and a string data type here. So what is the data type of result when we combine a number and a string? Let's try it out. So I'm going to save it here, go back over to the browser, hit refresh, and you can see that the data type is a string. So what that tells us, and go back over to the code, what that tells us is that when you combine a number with a string, the resulting data type is going to be a string. So anytime there's a string involved in an expression, the result is going to be a string. All right, let's go ahead and delete this. Just a few more odds and ends and then we'll be done. Now there are some rules to naming your variables in this code sample. You can see here that the variable starts with the number 1, and that's against the rules. This would throw an error, so you'd have to go digging through the console log and the developer tools to figure out this one. You can put numbers inside of variable names, but the variable names just can't start with numbers. So I think one of your questions coming up is for you to Google the other rules for variable names, and there's a few more, but one of them is that your variable names cannot start with a number. Okay, and then a lot of times we want to use what's called camel case for our variable names, and I'm not going to explain that in this video right now. I'll leave it up to you to Google it, but if you Google camel case in programming, it'll explain how programmers, what camel case is, and I'll just leave that one up to you to figure it out. Okay, one last thing here, logging variables. Let's just go ahead and copy this last code sample from that last black box here. Copy it, paste it into our script tag. And so what we've got here is a variable called last name, and we're setting it to a value of Jones, and it's a string, so we have quotes around it. And then this next line here, we've got console.log, and then inside the parentheses we've got last name. So I'm going to ask you to do this a lot in our coding problems. I'm going to ask you to log something, and when I ask you to log something, that's what I want you to do. Is I want you to write console.log, and then inside the parentheses put whatever it is that I ask you to log. So in this case, if I said log last name, I would want you to type in this here. So let's see what that does. What it does is it writes the value of this variable into the log, and that's the same log that we looked at when we looked at the console when we were checking for errors. So go ahead and save this page, and then go back over to the browser and hit refresh, and then pull up your developer tools here. So I just hit F12 there and make sure you're on the console, and you can see there's our log message. So we do this a lot when we're kind of checking things, and we'll log out variables, and you can even put expressions in those console.logs if you want. But when I ask you to log something, that's what I want you to do, is do console.log, and then inside the parentheses put in whatever I'm asking you to log. All right, that'll do it for this video. Sorry it went so long.